Okay, planning permission is sought to vary the hours for deliveries to enable those to commence from 5 AM. The applicant has agreed through the application process that the permission can be granted on a temporary basis for a period of 12 months. There are no updates to the report, and the recommendation is for approval as per your papers on page 254 and 255. Thank you.
Thank you. Very short. We have one public speaker, Councillor Tommy Brown. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I would firstly like to say that the original restriction on deliveries when Tesco's was first planned was given for very good reason. It was to help preserve nearby residents' quality of life and sleep patterns. What has changed to warrant the need to interfere from what reports say seems to be working at the moment, very few complaints. The thing is, it's a whole different ballgame when the start times move to 5 AM. Most people are getting up during the working week at around 7 AM anyway, or shortly after, and will have accepted a bit of noise at that time. Most people are not getting up at 5 AM. It is generally a quiet time, and residents will certainly not be putting up with any noise so early in the day. If this application succeeds, the council needs to prepare for the possibility of many complaints. Another concern I have is item 16 in your report on page 250. It states that the ambient predicted noise levels are averaged out over a specific time period. It is not the ambient predicted noise levels that wake people up, it is peak noise. Incidents, the bang of a stiff lever on a tailgate of a truck, the sound of a reversing alarm left on by mistake, the squeak of a gate opening. To average out all these noises into one constant predicted noise makes the noise assessment report, in my opinion, next to worthless. My final main concern is what is the business case for this unwarranted intrusion into the quiet time of my residents. We have just a couple of lines of text from the applicant saying that the existing conditions hinder Tesco's ability to serve customers who are local residents and limits the ability of fresh produce to be available to home shopping customers. Not exactly a compelling business case stacked with facts and figures. I'm sure that with a little bit of better planning on the side of Tesco's that they could get over any problems without having to open earlier. To sum up, the town council object, the ward member objects, and the nearby residents certainly object. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Right, Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to remind colleagues that when we first supported the build of Tesco's in Haverhill, condition 19 was placed to protect the amenities of occupiers of nearby premises in accordance with the provisions of policy DS3 and NEF of the replacement local plan. But what has changed to make this decision able to be discharged? The application refers to national planning policy in favour of sustainable business, but at no point explains what has changed to require such early deliveries that qualifies for being considered under the framework. The store has operated since 2009 under the current conditions without any apparent hindrance, but according to the Sharps-Redmore report, that hindrance now exists. And I'm going to refer to you to that a bit later. Specifically limiting the ability to serve customers who are local residents and severely limiting the availability of fresh produce to home deliveries. The argument in favour is that the change will contribute towards a competitive town centre and that taking deliveries earlier than currently will strengthen the economy of Haverhill. There is no financial evidence to illustrate the economic argument, merely the assertion that earlier deliveries are good for the economy. Don't most people shop for groceries on their way home or at lunchtime? How much is the economy of Haverhill being damaged by people buying their fresh food later in the day, I ask? The neighbouring homes are still there. Whatever the quality of Tesco's economic argument might be, the quality of life for local residents is protected by the conditions that we, as the council, imposed, and these neighbours have written to the council asking for that protection to be maintained. Those conditions amounted to undertakings made by us to the neighbours to protect them, and I think we should keep our promises. The committee needs to consider whether the marginal contribution to Tesco's profits achieved by allowing early deliveries is really sufficient to outweigh the social and environmental dimensions of sustainable development. And in considering that, we should reflect back on the hard work by the planning officers and this development committee in 2009 of carefully crafting those planning conditions to mitigate the problems and impactful development brings with it, in order to achieve a balance between the economic interest of developers and the environmental interest of neighbours. We should now set out a principle that us having bust a gut to enable Tesco's to build their store in the first place, Tesco or any other developer for that matter, needs to recognise that without condition 19 and conditions 15, 16, 17 and 18 in place, they would never have got their supermarket in the first place. Just need a drink, Chair, excuse me. I'd like to refer to the Sharp-Sprague-Moore Acoustic Consultants report. And I don't know if my colleagues on the committee have had a chance to have a look at that, but I'm going to refer to certain sections of it. The Town Council obviously looked at this very thoroughly. All delivery event noise levels in Table 8 to 12, Para 6.7 are predicted, and I'd like to emphasise that they are predicted. All noise measurements were taken on site. No measurements have been taken at the properties identified as closest. Changes of up to 3 dB, that's decibels, may be imperceptible. Over 6 is significant, and Table 2 at 410 confirms this. The tables in Appendix B1 consistently show high peaks comparable to daytime measurements during midnight to 4 AM. This is clearly incongruous and cast doubt on the accuracy of the measurements. The entire basis of the case for the noise not adversely affecting residential amenity is based on predicted noise from deliveries being less than existing ambient noise. The existing ambient noise already breaches the WHO guidelines, and extending delivery times can only increase the extent of the breach. And I really hope that this committee considers those residents that live near this very busy store. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Beckwith.
Thank you, Jim. I can't follow that. Maureen's obviously done a lot of research into the application, and that's to be commended. I was thinking back when I read this about an inspector's report I read, and it's a long time ago, and it was to do with a nightclub in Bury and transient people walking through residential areas. And it said the World Health Organisation state that disruption of sleep is a health issue. And it's as simple as that, Chairman. We put that condition on, and I remember doing it, I think it was 2009 or so. We put it on for a reason, and I can't see, unless everybody's moved out of the adjacent dwellings, that the reason has changed. So therefore, the condition should stay as and I move as such.
Sorry, could you start on that last bit again?
I think the condition should remain, Chairman, as it is.
Thank you.
Whatever.
Sorry, you were moving a refusal, were you, Councillor Beckwith?
Refusal of this application, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Seconded by Maureen. Right, who wants to switch to Councillor Peel? You go next.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult one to some extent, because I'm not convinced of the level of the noise as I live somewhere which has Kalina and other traffic travelling past through the night. But I don't think I feel very firmly that we've imposed a condition which has had a lot of work go behind it in the first place by both officers and my colleagues, but also particularly by officers drawing up those conditions. I think we have to stick by our conditions unless there's an absolutely compelling case to vary them. And I can't see that we've got a compelling case in this case. So I'm afraid I'm swayed by the arguments of the objectors here.
Thank you. I think we've got a similar one to this at Sainsbury's in Haverhill, didn't we, some time ago? Similar type, one lorry in the night. Councillor Cangle.
Well, as you know, somebody drives lorries, and mentioning Gordon Cox, I've still got his emails complaining about early works before a certain time in certain areas of Haverhill. I've still got them. We deliver certain areas, all road managers, all different places, where there is residential. And I'll tell you now, there's a lot of roads where I can't go down at certain times before 6 and after a certain time at night because they've got restrictions on them because they're not residential. Well, they're driving. So we've got directions that we can't go down with a South or Woolwich or Redmond, and there's industrial areas there, but we just cannot use certain roads. And this one's smack bang in the middle of a residential area. Now I know, because I'm not allowed to do it, but we use a pallet truck, and if you use a pallet truck, just move the stuff up the front, even if you come down, so it's sounds like the underground train going. And that literally goes and that literally sounds like that when you're opening it, and that's surprising how far that noise carries. So I know I wouldn't be allowed to take in certain areas. And this one was actually asking for an extension. We did actually put those, and the Tesco is right, we did put them in there for a reason. Reason is the return. Isn't that said? No doubt about that. But I know I can't go down certain areas, I can't unload in certain areas when it's residential. So I go against all the different things I come across when I'm driving. So there's no way I could support this school before a certain time of day. So I'll go with big move refusal, I'll go with the biggest bag up front.
Thank you, Councillor Cummins. Councillor Byrne.
Yeah, what I'd like to remind colleagues of, I think the Sainsbury's situation was somewhat different, because where the lorry would drive into a car park, where they would offload, they were not adjacent to any residential area whatsoever. They were adjacent to the A1307, the other side of the store. So that originally was going to be once a week. I think it probably now is every morning round about 5. But the circumstances are totally different in terms of residents and where people lived in the environment. So it does work in some places, but not here.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Yeah, go on, John.
Okay, with regard to the point about the predicted noise levels in the Sharps Redmore report, this is one of the reasons that Karen Cattle from Environmental Health and I have discussed this with the applicant. The only way in which we can find the actual noise level is for them to operate. At the moment they can't operate in those hours because they would be in breach of their condition. Therefore, that is why we have suggested that they seek a 12-month temporary consent. This would enable the situation to be monitored. As a result of the application, objections were received about noise. This related to some refrigeration plant. People hadn't contacted Environmental Health about that noise until the planning application came in. Now that they have contacted her, she has been out, discussed with Tesco's, and is looking to, get that issue resolved. It's not a planning issue, it's something that's in her remit, and this is what often happens. So it was felt that if we went down the route of allowing a 12-month temporary consent, it would enable them to operate a maximum of 2 lorries between the hours of 5 and 7, and then we would be able to monitor, residents would be able to keep us informed in terms of if it was a problem. The application would then come back to members next year, and we would have a full picture in terms of whether it's an issue. Now obviously in granting a 12-month consent, yes, that may lead to problems over that period, but the considered view of our environmental health officer is that she doesn't feel on balance that there will be an issue. But we have the comfort of it being a 12-month temporary permission, which we can then review.
Councillor Stevens.
Chairman, an interesting one, but surely there must be precedent in law about similar applications, and whether we could stand and appeal from Tesco's citing elements of law that have previously been considered. This can't be the first time this has arisen in planning law in this country, and so we should be able to take guidance from it.
In which case, a consideration of 12-month permission where we can make it on it after 12 months might be a better option. Councillor Byrne.
I will totally oppose that, Chair. We're forgetting why, in the first place, we put in condition 19, 15, 16, 17 and 18. And perhaps if this was going to be reviewed after noise meter readings, actually, you're suggesting may be the answer. That will be 12 months, I would suggest, of those that live really close, of live in hell for 12 months. The conditions were put in because of where Tesco's is sited, when you look at the the residential area around them. That store is very close to lots of residents, very, very close. And I am totally opposed to having the trial. I want you to support that the conditions already in place are adhered to.
Right. No more? At the moment we have it proposed and seconded for refusal. And if nobody else wants to speak, we'll go to the vote on that one. Those in favour of refusal of this application, please show.
Sorry to interrupt. Under the protocol for decision making, we consider that this is a matter which should be subject to your minded to process, and therefore your vote would now be on the motion that you are minded to refuse, and there would be a risk assessment report.
And it will come back to the next meeting. So back to the vote. Those in favour of refusal, please show.
No, that's not very serious. I think it's not quite basically against it.
Could I ask you to show again? Sorry, I'm in trouble.
Runs down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
8, yes.
And those against? Sorry, those
Those against refusal.
against the motion? Yes.
2,
4.
3, 4.
Obviously 4. Can you see the picture again, please? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sorry, there's 8 for and 2 against, so that's minded to refuse.